Hello. So, in today's lesson, we want to look at what problems did Elizabeth face in 1558 when she became Queen of England. First of all, we're going to try and understand Elizabeth's personality. What were her strengths? What were her weaknesses as a person? And then we're going to look in detail at 5 big problems she faced as soon as she took to the throne. Now, in today's lesson, you are going to have 2 quizzes to fill in at different times during the lesson. Can you make sure you've got those quizzes from Google Classroom to complete when you are prompted? Please make sure you read the question properly. You only get one chance at this. And this needs to be submitted to your teacher by Sunday the 17th of May at 5 p.m. Along the way, it might help, guys, if you've got a pen and paper to make some notes to help you. So, let's talk about Elizabeth's personality first of all. What strengths did she have? Well, she was very intelligent and well educated. So, for example, she spoke Latin, Greek, French, and Italian. So she's able to speak a wide range of languages, and Latin, again, is seen as a male language to learn. So she's proven she's just as good as a man. She's got a tough and resolute personality. Now, she'd actually been imprisoned in the Tower of London by Mary, her half-sister, in 1554. And there was a real risk she could have been executed at any time by her half-sister. So from a young age, she's really tough. She's been through quite a tough upbringing there. She's got a good understanding of politics. And by that, she knows how to work with people like her courtiers. They all want power, they all want influence. These are her advisors. She knows how to keep them on her side. And she is confident and she is charismatic. She can make speeches that will win people over. She can convince people to do things. They're all really good strengths as a leader. But she did have some downfalls. She did have some weaknesses. Let's look at those. First of all, she's got a temper that people feared. It's probably something she got from her dad, Henry VIII. And that meant some people were scared to tell her the truth. There were occasions when she would shout at people. She spat at someone once. She even took her shoe off and threw it at an advisor once. Now, Elizabeth loved to be praised. She loved to be complimented by young men at the court. And this could sometimes lead to wrong decisions being made because she'd been influenced by the wrong person. And finally, she often took a long time to make up her mind, especially with really serious matters. Now, we've all got a friend like that, haven't we? Someone who just can't make their minds upon anything. If you don't have a friend like that, it's probably you doing it. It's probably you annoying everyone. Now, this annoyed her advisors called the Privy Council, who would carry out her actions. You can see in the picture there, they would often be waiting for her to make a decision. And these big decisions, should we go to war with Spain? Should we tax the people more money? And Elizabeth would often hesitate and say, oh, I'm not sure. So, there's the strengths and there's the weaknesses of Elizabeth. But when she took the throne, what problems did she face? Well, problem 1 is the legitimacy. Now, you could only take to the throne of England if you were what's called legitimate. That means that you were born when the reigning king and queen were married. You were born in wedlock. And if you didn't fulfill that criteria, then you could not become a monarch. It was that simple. Your parents had to be married when you were born. Now, we know that Henry VIII is Elizabeth's father. At the start, Henry VIII had been married to Catherine of Aragon, and that marriage hadn't gone particularly well for Henry. He had wanted a son. Catherine had had lots of children which had died, had been stillborn or just died a few weeks into the pregnancy, and only one daughter had survived, Mary. That wasn't what Henry wanted at all. Henry wanted a son. And so Henry felt he was being punished by God for marrying Catherine, and he wanted to divorce Catherine. He wanted to marry someone else who he felt could give him a son. And that person was Anne Boleyn. And he would eventually marry Anne Boleyn and Anne Boleyn would give birth to Elizabeth as a result. This was Elizabeth's parents. It was Henry and Anne Boleyn. But the problem is that Catherine was alive when Elizabeth was born. And so some people, mainly Catholics, said Elizabeth is not legitimate because Henry had been married to Catherine. There's only one marriage. The marriage to Anne Boleyn doesn't count. and therefore Elizabeth is not a legitimate heir to the throne because Catherine was alive, Henry's first wife. Now, to make matters worse, after executing Anne Boleyn, Henry had said Elizabeth was illegitimate as well and said she cannot take the throne, she's an illegitimate child. So even Elizabeth's own dad had said that she was illegitimate. But he later reversed that decision and said, no, Elizabeth can take to the throne after all when I die. And it's also the fact that she's a woman causes issues, because there were lots of people who said a woman could not be a monarch and women shouldn't have these positions of power. Now that comes from the Bible and Christianity. Obviously, everything was a Christian at the time, and it said that women should be under the authority of men. So it says in the Bible, and that's what people believe. They believe that men should control women, not that a woman should control the country. There's also the idea of monarchs were expected to lead their army into battle, and people felt Elizabeth wouldn't be able to do that being a woman. You wouldn't see her at the front of an army charging towards the enemy. And there was a general conception that women were not considered to be physically, mentally, or emotionally capable of governing. They felt it was beneath them and it was the role of a man. Problem 2, marriage. Now, Elizabeth, as soon as she took the throne, was under constant pressure to marry by her advisors, by people like the Privy Council, those advisors we saw the picture of earlier. Now, there's several reasons for this. Firstly, people said, if you marry, your husband will be king, and we want a man in charge of the government. The idea was that she would then have children. Those children would be in wedlock, there would be no issues there at all, they could take to the throne, they would be legitimate. That key term we just looked at. There would prevent plots by people who felt they should take to the throne. At this time, if someone wanted to take the throne, they could target and try and kill Elizabeth, and there was no clear successor to the throne. If she was married, there'd be far less chance of that happening. And also, if she had a husband, he could be the military leader. He could lead the armies out into battle as well. He could take that role. Now, these are all good reasons, possibly, why Elizabeth should marry. You can understand the pressure here. But what were the problems if she did marry? Well, first of all, she can't just marry anyone off the streets in England. You've got to marry people of royalty. And there's no one really in England who fits that role. If she'd wanted to marry, it would have had to have been to a foreign king or a foreign prince. And if it's a foreign person, the likelihood is they'll put their country before England. Also, Elizabeth was worried, actually, if I marry, then the husband will take my power away. At the moment, I am the queen, I'm the rightful queen, I'm in charge of England. If I marry, people will listen to my husband instead of me. He will have the authority, not me. And so we often saw the advisors, her advisors, the Privy Council, say to Elizabeth, are you going to marry? Are you going to marry? Are you going to marry? But she never said she wouldn't. Elizabeth never said, I'm not going to marry at all. But she would find excuses why she couldn't marry just yet. She kept putting it off the whole time. And again, I guess that links back, doesn't it, to one of her problems where she couldn't make her mind up about decisions. Here's an example of that. She never wants to marry. And the third problem was financial. Now, when Elizabeth took to the throne, the crown, and when I say the crown, I basically mean England, the government, was £300,000 in debt. Now, in today's money, that is about £108 million in debt. That is a huge, huge amount. And money is everything. Money makes sure that you have got the best defences. Money makes sure you have got the best army. You are prepared for attack by the enemy. Why was England in so much debt? Well, they had fought recently several expensive wars. Wars cost money. You need to pay soldiers, equip soldiers, and if you don't win those battles, then it costs you. To raise money in the past, lands belonging to the royal family had been sold. So they had said, we will sell this land to people in order to pay for money for attacks. And also, the country only made about £286,000, £667 a year. And that meant unless things changed, the debt's only going to get worse each year. Elizabeth has to find a way of making more money. How could she do that? Well, there's a few ways that a monarch, so a king or a queen, can make money. First of all, they could ask for loans from rich merchants. When I say rich merchants, they're basically property owners, people who own a lot of housing and so on back then. Now, sometimes these loans weren't repaid, they were forced. So you basically say to rich people, hey, you need to give me some money, I'm the queen. Is it a loan? Yes, it's a loan. Will I get the money back eventually? And it just doesn't happen. You could also rent or sell some of your land that you had. The monarch had a lot of land throughout England. You can let people use that land for a price, or you could sell it to them as well. And there's also what we call the profits of justice. This was when someone had done something bad in England. So, for example, they'd committed a crime and you could find that person. That money would make its way back to Elizabeth. So there were ways that money could be made. But another way was by asking Parliament to collect extra taxes for her. This was something called extraordinary taxation. Now, there was a member of Parliament roughly in most towns. It was their job to knock on the door, to collect taxes to give to Elizabeth. But sometimes Elizabeth would need even more money from people. She would need even more taxes. So she would call Parliament together. Let's see what that would look like. And she would say, I need you to go and collect even more taxes for me. We need to get even more money from the normal people. Now, as you can imagine, if you're a member of Parliament, that isn't a particularly popular job. You don't want to be knocking on people's doors saying, I need more money from you. So Parliament would want something in return for doing this. They would want Elizabeth to pass through some laws. They would want Elizabeth to listen to them as well. Now, Elizabeth doesn't really want this. Elizabeth wants to run the country and make up laws by herself and not have to listen to a group of men telling her what law should be made. So Elizabeth wanted to try to avoid using Parliament to get taxation wherever possible. She doesn't want Parliament, she wants to make money a different way. So, that's the end of the first 3 problems there. Can you pause the video and complete quiz 1? The light green background should help you here. They're the slides that you need. Again, please read the question carefully. You only get one go at this. And when you're done, press play to continue. Okay, we've got 2 more problems to look at. Problem 4 is religion. So England was a Christian country. But when Elizabeth took to the throne, we saw 2 competing forms of religion, 2 ways of being a Christian, both believing that theirs was the correct and the true way, and any other way was a sin. This was being a Catholic and being a Protestant. And this was a huge issue in England. Religion is highly important to pretty much everyone in England at this time. And to make matters worse for Elizabeth, not only has she got these 2 groups she's got to please, Catholics and Protestants, but it's her family that has caused this religious problem, this religious divide. Let's have a look at how. So first of all, let's try and understand the difference between the 2. So we have got here the inside of the churches for Roman Catholic and Protestant. And you can see the Roman Catholic Church is brightly decorated. It's a grand building and it makes people feel close to God. There's a lot of colour there. We can see the priest wearing colourful robes and so on. It's a celebration. It's people moving closer to God with this lovely architecture in the building. And compared to that, the Protestants said, no, we don't need colour. We need churches to be simple. We don't want a lot of gold in there. We don't want the priest to wear colourful robes. We want a simple area where we can worship and we won't feel distracted. So there's just one change there straight away in worshipping Christianity. Let's look at a few more details there. So Catholics said that the Pope was the representative of God and he was the head of the church across the world. Whereas Protestants said, no, the monarch, the king or the queen, is the head of the church in their country. It's not the Pope. Catholics said the Bible and church services should be in Latin, whereas Protestants said, no, we want everyone to be able to understand these texts, these books, and so we should see them translated to other languages like English. Catholics said the church, with bishops and priests, have to inform people what the Bible says and how this should be interpreted. So they tell people what to do. Whereas Protestants said, no, let people read these books and decide what it means. They can communicate directly with God through things like prayer. One final change we'll look at. The church can forgive sins, is what Catholics believe. Whereas actually Protestants say, no, the church cannot forgive sins, only God can. Now, this is just an outline here to show you the difference between the two religions. They both believe in Christianity, but there's different ways of doing this, different structures. So, we had said that Elizabeth's family had caused this divide. Let's try and understand how. Well, her father, Henry, England used to be Catholic for centuries. But when Henry wanted a divorce, he made himself leader of the church and not the Pope. Now, it's very complex because he stayed a Catholic, but actually he had brought in some Protestant ideas by doing that. Things became worse because her half-brother, Edward, when he became king, he turned England Protestant and he started killing Catholics. So now we see a country that used to be Catholic being told to be Protestant instead, just like Edward was the leader. To make matters worse, after that, Mary, Elizabeth's half-sister, took to the throne, and she was a Catholic. She basically undid all of Edward's changes, and in 5 years, she burned about 300 Protestants. So now Elizabeth takes to the throne, and she's got to try to deal with all of this mess that her family has caused. Now, Elizabeth was a Protestant, but she was going to need to try to find a way to please both groups. Otherwise, England would just be divided by religion forever. Now, to complicate things just a little bit more, we were starting to see a third group emerge in England, as if two wasn't complicated enough. And that third group was some extreme Protestants. They wanted even more change to religion. They wanted to make England even purer in their eyes. And so they were known as Puritans as a result. These extreme versions of Protestants. What did they want? Well, they wanted to manage the churches themselves. They didn't want anyone like a bishop or a pope telling them what to do. They wanted the churches to be just incredibly basic. Nothing fancy at all, just a simple table. No fancy clothes for the priests. Only believe what was in the Bible. And they said that the monarch should not be the head of the church and should have no role to play in religion at all. The monarch does not have any role at all with religion. Now, if you wanted to guess which one of these was most concerning to Elizabeth, it's that last one. Saying that the monarch should not be the head of the church and should have no role to play in religion. Because that's taking away her power. Elizabeth didn't want that. Elizabeth didn't want the Puritans to have any say in England. And so Elizabeth was prepared to work with the Protestants and the Catholics, but she was not prepared to please the Puritans at all. They were too small a group and they were too extreme. Okay, moving on. The last problem 5. The threats from other countries, especially when England was so poor as well at this time. They could not afford a war. Who were the 3 countries? Well, the first one was France. Now, England and France were what we'd call traditional enemies. They had fought each other a lot in the past, including recently when Mary, the previous monarch on the throne, and Elizabeth's half-sister had started wars with them. Now, France was a deeply Catholic country. They would not want a Protestant like Elizabeth on the throne. They felt like Elizabeth was a sinner. They felt like Elizabeth was trying to destroy the Catholic faith across Europe, and so they would want her gone straight away. And they might try to put a Catholic on the throne. We talked about plots earlier when we said about Elizabeth marrying. Well, this is France's attempts here to do that. France might try and put someone on the throne like Elizabeth's cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. There she is. Now, Mary, Queen of Scots was Elizabeth's cousin, and some people felt that she should be on the throne instead. She was a Catholic. She was seen as legitimate, unlike Elizabeth. And this would cause a huge problem for her, the fact that there was someone who some people felt should be on the throne instead. This would be a problem for Elizabeth for a long time. And Mary was married to the French royal family, and there was a constant threat to Elizabeth. She was going to have to deal with this later on, her cousin. Who was the second country? Scotland. Now, Scotland was an independent country, and again, it was a traditional enemy of England. They had fought several times before. And when Mary became Queen of Scotland, Elizabeth feared a Scottish invasion. At this point, let's just make sure we're aware of these two different Marys. If we go back to that previous picture, this is Mary, Queen of Scots. This is Elizabeth's cousin. She is alive when Elizabeth takes to the throne. The other Mary we've looked at is Mary's half-sister, Mary Tudor. She had been on the throne before. She was the one that had burned the Protestants, and she was dead at this point while Elizabeth takes the throne. Third country, Spain. Spain was also a Catholic country that wanted England to have a Catholic monarch, a Catholic king or a Catholic queen. Now, France and Spain had been at war. Although they were both Catholic, they had been at war with each other to try to prove who was the strongest. But when Elizabeth took to the throne, France and Spain became allies. They made peace. And there was a real fear that these two powerful countries might now work together to target England to get rid of that Protestant monarch. Elizabeth had to be careful. And they are the 5 problems. So, quiz 2. Pause the video here. Can you give that one a go? Again, read the questions through carefully, please, because you only get one go at it, and make sure it's submitted. The blue slides will help you with this one. This quiz will focus on problems 4 and 5, so religion and problems with other countries. And when you're done with that, press play to conclude this lesson. And that's it for today. Thank you so much. As always, any questions, please contact me at gbrown@stopseyhighschool.co.uk. Or contact your history teacher if you've got any questions as well. Your next lesson is up Wednesday the 20th of May, so please look after yourselves, get some fresh air as well, guys, get some exercise, take care, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.